Welcome everyone to Mail Fuzz TV. I am Peter, that is Connor, and we are going to talk about Star Trek Deep Space Nine Season 1 Episode 14. It is called Progress. So, full spoilers for the episode, as always. This episode largely revolves around Kira and a plot with her trying to evacuate an old man from a moon that they're about to turn into like a mining moon, and it's going to be uninhabitable for any, anyone.
Kind of shitty,
really. So that is the main plot. There's also a B plot with Nog and Jake getting into a bit of wheeling and dealing and some negotiating.
For a long time, I was convinced was going to tie in, and then it just doesn't.
I never did actually. It felt so separate.
I think it's when it got to the point where they had land. Okay. I was like, oh, is that going to be relevant on the moon?
Oh, okay, no, because I think the land was in Bajor. But yeah, maybe you were thinking, oh, the old man will move to this land or something.
Yeah.
Kind of thing. No, Joe, this episode's not that highly rated on IMDb, so I kind of went in with muted expectations because I was like, oh, okay, typically, if it's in the low 60s or whatever, it ends up just being a so-so episode, and but sometimes you end up disagreeing. And I actually think this one has a bit more to it than other episodes that have had this rating. I think it's not a perfect episode by any means, but I do think it's got some interesting character stuff for Kira and what it's doing.
I agree with that. I think I can see where the lower rating's coming from. I think it very much lays its real world influences just right out in front of you, and it's not subtle with what it's doing. But the Kira stuff's solid. I definitely give you that.
I mean, I think it fits in with her sort of progress as a character that we've had is this idea that she was in this war against the Cardassians for so long, and now that they're gone and she's now shifting to this role of authority, she's struggling with the mentality of like, how do I function as this versus the freedom fighter or whatever she would have classed herself as before. And she relates to the old man in this because he's refusing to leave and go home or go elsewhere because he is home.
Definitely not home.
Yeah. And it's an interesting thing because it's they present it as this moon's got this energy source that's going to literally fuel like so many homes during the winter. I think they say hundreds of thousands of Bajorans will have heat and power because of this new thing they're doing.
And it's basically government requisition the land.
Yeah. And the guy's obviously told way in advance, and Kira goes down and is like, hey, there's still someone there. She goes down. And this guy he's basically just like a sort of expert level stalling tactician. He just kind of keeps pushing. He makes it supper. He keeps telling her stories, so on, so on.
Yeah. It's kind of next level shitbaggery.
Yeah, well, because that's the thing. He's been a little sexist at first, and you think, oh, where's this episode going? Like she keeps saying, "Don't call me girl." He says, "Oh, you look good from this angle." And then he kind of smiles when she starts to yell at him, and she realizes, oh, wait, you're just trying to piss me off, so I'll leave. Oh, that's not working. No, we're not having that. And then there's not another example of it after that. After that, he's just kind of this, like, he's a bit mischievous of an old man, but he's not problematic, I would say.
No, he's nice enough.
Yeah. Well, I think that's kind of one of the things that the episode hinges on, is that he is fairly likable.
If he's not likable, this episode doesn't work at all.
Yeah, I think that's a fair point. But he is likable, and it does work, and it kind of goes through this thing where she there's a great moment where they're having the supper and she's telling stories, he's telling stories, and she's saying, oh yeah, the Cardassians were here and we fought back and it was tough, because this guy basically just kind of avoided the conflict. I mean, he did encounter Cardassians. He hates people in uniforms because he's encountered Cardassians on the moon, but he kind of like wasn't part of the fight. He removed himself from like regular Bajoran civilization and went off to this moon. So she's telling them how they won the fight, and ultimately she pauses just before she says, what was the phrase? But it basically matched what he's doing.
It was about not giving up and
yeah. It wasn't. She didn't use the word stubborn, but it was basically by being stubborn and never giving in. Devotion, I think, may have been one of the words she used, but she basically realizes that she's describing what he's doing now and he's not giving in, but it's kind of more nuanced because he's not giving in to his own government. He's not giving in to the needs of Bajorans. Whereas obviously she was in this very clear black and white. They're the villains. We are the good guys. We have to, win our land back. We have to get rid of them, kind of thing.
Yeah, and I think it's very clear there's a Native American parallel going on in this episode. Like I say, it's not subtle about that. And this here, this, as far as he's concerned, this is his land. Why should he have to move? Why should he have to give it up because the government insists that resources, greater good. It's his, and she's realizing that as the episode goes on.
Yeah, I think she sympathized because he's kind of fighting for something that he believes in. And like, what? Literally, is his land.
As much as it is, like say, for the greater good of the population as a whole, he's not in the wrong at any point.
No, it's the sort of thing where obviously they've made this choice and he's refusing, and it leads to some really interesting things because obviously she becomes more sympathetic as it goes on. She tries to argue on his behalf to try and not even like let him stay. She's just sort of arguing for more time to convince him. They're saying, no, we kind of need to start this by this date so that we actually have this power and time for everyone, blah, blah, blah. And she's clearly becoming sympathetic and she sort of like has a renewed focus to go down. But then when the old man gets hurt, she goes down with a couple of red shirts and one of them ends up firing a phaser. Not to kill, obviously, but just and ends up hitting him. And Bashir goes down to like medically treat him. She ends up staying down there to look after him. Which leads to two great scenes with Sisko, actually, who's not a prominent character in this episode, really, but he has two really standout scenes.
It does.
One with Bashir, where Bashir's basically saying, yeah, she stayed down there, this is going to tangle a lot of webs, right? And Sisko says, well, why don't we say that you asked for her to remain down there for humanitarian reasons? And he's like, but that's not true. And Sisko goes, make it true. And then he just sort of puts in the request, and he pauses halfway through. For how long? For a couple of days, sir. Yeah. So I thought that was an interesting.
It's this really nice use of, obviously, Sisko likes playing by the rules to an extent, but he's willing to bend them, but still in a way that is procedurally correct. Like there's a record of this now. Even if it isn't real, it's in the logbook. It's
they've done the paperwork. It's the chain
very informally,
events.
but it's there.
Yeah, and then the other big scene with him is when he comes down to speak to her, and she's obviously struggling with this decision. She's starting to feel really conflicted about and this is where it really ties into like her past, and this is something that's come up before, is her shifting from the role she was before the start of the show and what she is now as part of the establishment, as part of the authority that are running the place. And Sisko's like, obviously he says a couple of things like, I don't want to break in a new first officer, yada yada, but ultimately he's like, look, I thought you were a stubborn cow when I first took this role, but you're actually very good at what you do. And the thing is that I'm paraphrasing here, but this is kind of the meaning I took from it, is that you can do so much for Bajor and the people in Bajor in this role, and because you're sympathetic to them is why you're good for the job, because you've got their interests at heart, even though sometimes you're going to have to make tough decisions that's not going to benefit every single one of them individually, but you care about them, and that's why you're the best choice for this role. And you have to sort of come to terms with that. And this guy has to move out here no matter what. Even if you refuse to be the one to do it, someone else will. So you should do it. You should take the role to do it because you're going to do it with sympathy. You're going to do it because you care about him, and not someone else who's just doing it because it's the next thing on their list to do.
Yeah, it's a really strong example of showing us that Sisko, obviously he's still relatively new to us, but it's showing us that he's a experienced leader. He understands that you got to make tough calls sometimes, but you can do it still in the right way, and also leaning with don't just pass it on to someone because you don't want to do it. You've got to be able to deal with those things yourself if you're going to insist that they are what gets done. You've got to be okay with the consequences of your orders.
Yeah. And the end of this episode is, I think, relatively profound in the way it plays out, where he's still refusing to go and says, as long as my house is standing, I'm not leaving, and she just sets his house on fire. It says, you need to come. And she says a couple of things like, I need friends I can count on Bajor. That can be you. I think that she's kind of basically saying to him, much like I have found myself in a position where I can do more for other Bajorans, you could do that too. You have wisdom, you have this experience that you can use to help others. And we never get to see him accept that. We never get to see the result. Maybe we'll see him again in the future. I don't necessarily think we will, but we could. But this episode ends on this stark thing where she makes these possibilities, this offer to him, you can be all these things. But fundamentally, this moment is out of your hands and you don't get to make the choice. The choice is made for you. And it ends with her saying, beam is up.
Yeah, and it's kind of depressing because after all this, this friendship they formed over the episode, probably hates her right now. I mean, maybe he'll come to terms with it and, understand in the long run. But here and now, he probably hates her, right? He just burnt her home down.
His home down. I mean, he even asks her, use that weapon on me, because if I leave here, I'll die. And her last line of the episode, other than beam us up, is, no, you won't. Like, and it's this idea that for him, he can't see living anywhere else but here. And she's saying, no, you can move on. And as much as we can compare this to some real world things, I do think there's a little bit more nuance to this, because he is like Bajoran. He kind of fled the mainland and he's been kind of like sort of taken back in. And I think there's an interesting thing here where the idea of helping someone get through something when they refuse to themselves, because she says, I'm saving your life by doing this, because if you stay here, you're just going to die. So I get why he'll hate her, but I don't think she comes off as villainous here either. I think she comes off as like entirely understandable in all the choices she makes here in the last couple of minutes.
Absolutely. I think it's why this episode does succeed in what it's trying to do for the most part, is that neither of the characters are wrong. And both of them, you understand why they're doing what they're doing, what their feelings are. And it's not like, one's clearly in the right and the other is wrong. It's like, no, they're both right for themselves. And not in a, it's not like the old man's being selfish or anything like that. He's just wanting to do his own thing and live in his own home.
There's a few other little things that I would compliment. Is I like that the guy representing the government who's like putting all these plans into motion, I like that he doesn't turn into a villain when he's like, he doesn't, he's frustrated, he wants to get things going, but he never becomes this maniacal asshole who's like, screw him then, like kill him. Like, he's never that. Yeah,
there's a point where she's like, can we look back into that other procedure that we had, on the charts at some point? But that wouldn't, mean that everyone had to move out. And they're like, no, we tried, we really did, but it's not going to yield enough quick enough. It's this or nothing.
Yeah, and I do really appreciate that. By the like, I think I want to really compliment this episode, because this episode would never get made just today in like a modern Star Trek show, because it's not an action episode. It's purely just a character dilemma that plays out, and I think the ending's quite impactful because of it, but it doesn't have the big whiz bang of a more exciting episode with a villain or anything like that. This is a quiet Star Trek episode that does not have a clean, neat, simple solution. It's this, nothing here is a win for anyone completely. It's about compromising, and it's about hard choices, and I kind of came out of it thinking, I liked that episode, and I like that it tackled this subject and it didn't try and sugarcoat it and didn't try to make it feel like there is like a happy solution that'll just make everyone. I like to think that, what's his name, Mullabak, the old man, I like to think that in time he will heal from this, he will grow, and he will start again. I mean, he thought he couldn't. It's like when someone loses like their husband or wife or something like that, and they think, I can't go on, and it takes time, it takes grieving, but eventually they kind of can start again, or something like that. So
yeah, I always say it's not an immediate thing. That he's not going to be okay right away. Right now, he is going to hate her and be angry and not happy at all about this situation. But yeah, I'm sure in time he would come around and kind of realize what's happened, and maybe even if it wasn't for the best for him, he can maybe see, okay, it's kind of what had to be done, and what's done is done, and maybe he can just move on.
Yeah, I think if nothing else, this is a great episode to, early on, we've been setting up all these characters, and Kira very much has been, they want Bajoran voices in Deep Space Nine, because this is ultimately their place, and they want to have the best interests of Bajorans, and I think having Kira in this episode, it really just shows that, and it puts it on display for the series, which is she cares on a human or Bajoran level, maybe I should say, but she cares on a personal level for these people that she's serving up in Deep Space Nine, and I believe that. I've now seen examples of it where it's not just like a statement, it's like, no, it's true, we've seen it, and I think that's good.
Definitely. I think it's really interesting, this part of the season, because I think it was it last episode, the one with O'Brien and Bashir down on the planet. Was that the one before?
That may have been. I think that was the last episode. Yeah.
Yeah, but between these two episodes, right here in the middle of the season, this just kind of showing us some wider Bajoran culture to some extent in different different areas and different ways. Obviously, this is a moon, but it's still part of the culture here. This man, and just kind of making it feel like it's not just one homogenous government entity. It is a real planet, and there are different groups of people. I think it's important establishing that here.
Yeah,
and
it's not that sci-fi thing where each planet, it's the ice planet, and it's only one type of person that's on the ice planet. It's a layered culture with people who disagree with each other about what to do.
And obviously Star Trek has had examples of both. It's definitely had the monocultures. It's also had pretty regularly just two cultures that are kind of clashing with each other. Just to prove a point, the ideological split down the middle of the two sides on one planet.
Yeah, which obviously serves its purpose for the stories it's telling when it's doing that. But I think the benefit of having Deep Space Nine just tied to one planet is that we're going to flesh it out. We're going to make it feel more real as a result.
Yeah, and it already does feel probably more real than most of the places we've visited in Trek.
Yeah. And the whole point of this show is that it is dealing with darker questions, more difficult questions, perhaps, than...
I think it's important because obviously we know, from an outside perspective, we know there's war coming in this show.
Sure, yes.
But I think that's important in that context for them to be setting up things like this here and now, early enough in the show that it's got this groundwork. It's going to feel like it's impacting everyday people, not just there's a big light in the sky. When it comes to some of those events down the line, we might think of this old man or that village from last time. There will be specific examples of various subcultures on this planet that we will think of being affected.
Yeah, I think it's episodes like this, and not that Next Gen never has quieter episodes, because it does, but I think episodes like this are clearly showing me how this is tackling things and makes the show feel distinct from Next Gen, where they both really deserve their own existence. Which is, Next Gen also tackles big questions. It tackles hard questions sometimes, and Picard will sometimes make speeches about those hard questions. But often it'll do it from this more kind of bird's eye view, where it's more of a, okay, can a machine be like is this man, is this
very grand philosophical questions?
Yeah, is this machine, can we call him a man? Does he have his own free will?
What
all
is
that
life?
Stuff. What is life? This is more kind of grounded, boots on the ground, these tough issues that two cultures or one culture mixed in with itself is facing, and it's doing sort of, I guess in a weird way, even though we're still dealing with an alien culture, we're still on the space station, this is dealing with there's less of a barrier where it's just more like the real world.
This is the closest we could get to it just being set on Earth.
Yeah.
In, relatively present day. This is as close as you're going to get in Star Trek, I think.
Yeah. So on all those fronts, it's good, and the subplot is fun enough for what it is. Basically, you've got, what was it? Yamek sauce was the thing.
Yes.
So Quark's upset because his brother has purchased a lot of Yamek sauce that they can't shift because only Cardassians like it, but the Cardassians are barely here anymore, so they're never going to have any use for it. So he's pissed. And Nog says he senses opportunity. The way these Ferengi all say opportunity, they all emphasize every syllable in a way that just...
He's getting more Ferengi every episode. I love it.
So he makes a deal with someone he wants gold plus platinum, of course, but the guy says, I don't have any gold plus platinum, but I do have these self-sealing bolt things. And Jake's like, no, we should trade, because then we can maybe sell them for something. So they trade them, and they're trying to figure out what they are, and O'Brien walks in. He's like, what's all this? And they expect him to know he's an engineer. He's like, oh, these self-sealing bolts? He's like, yeah. He's like, oh, I've never used them before. I don't even really know what they do, but I've heard of them. He walks back out.
It's like, they're a real thing.
And then they think, what about the guy who originally was going to buy these bolts? Maybe we could sell them to him for a discount. So they contact him.
Because some profit is better than no profit.
Yeah. But he's like, I don't have any gold plus platinum, but I do have land. And to be fair, Jake's like, no, land is the most useful as far as commerce goes. Land is the most valuable thing.
It is historically good investments.
Yeah, but Nog's like, no, that's just dirt. And I get, that sounds like a child saying, but land's just dirt. Like, but
no, I get where you come from, but it's not. That's a Ferengi saying. It's not something tangible that he can hold and then sell on to someone else. That's the problem.
But land, of course, real estate, like, when we have recessions, it's because the housing market's a load of shit, right? That's the main cause of it, which boils down to land. It's not really the structures that are on the land. It's the land itself that's really the root of everything.
Yeah. Land is valuable, always has been. It's what 90% of all wars have been fought about.
Aye. Obviously, as we start building floating space stations and stuff, things will change because.
No, it won't. Airspace is already sovereign. That it's only a matter of time before that extends into space.
Fine, I'll just go and I'll claim like one of the moons of Jupiter. Just this now.
Oh, let's be honest. Who doesn't own like a little square on the moon or some star that someone's bought them a chart saying this is your star?
Do you know what's so funny though? If people have bought like novelty squares of the moon, but then we actually end up going there and building colonies, are they going to have to like seek out everyone who owns all the little squares?
No, of course not. They're meaningless. But imagine if someone tried to say that 1 square foot on the moon, that's mine. You want to build there? Pay up. I just want to see someone try.
How does 50 million sound? Sounds good to me. I don't know about you.
Yeah.
You can afford it. You're building a place on the moon. Anyway, so they're in the bar again, and they overhear it's what was it? It's Quark and who is it that's talking to him? It's Odo, right? So Quark and Odo's like, hey, the Bajoran government really wants to get this land, and it's like, there's 4 different people, like groups that own this land. And I think when they were getting the land, Nog came up with a name for their company. He's like the Noje Corporation or something like that. Cause it's a combination of the names, and he's like, yeah, we're looking for this Noje Corporation because they own the last part of land that the government really want. And Quark's like, I've got nothing to do with this, but this sounds like you could barter a lot for this because it's the last.
Sounds like an opportunity.
An opportunity, yeah. And I'm not gonna lie, like this subplot's been fun enough, but I think it's all worth it for the moment that young Nog comes up and just goes, Uncle Quark, I have an opportunity that you may be interested in.
Quark's like, no, not now. And he's just like, no, Jay?
He just looks at both of them and he's like, no. I'd like to think Quark's quite impressed though with his
he definitely
nephew.
is.
Because there's one beat we missed out is that there is a moment where he does go to Quark after he's made the first deal and says, hey, all that Yamek sauce. And he's like, don't talk to me about it. He's like, well, do you want me to get rid of it for you? He's like, yeah, I don't care what you do with it. Take it. Get rid of it. So
they were thinking they're going to have to steal it, and they're like, oh, how are we going to get in to get it?
He effectively made Quark hand it over for free. And now
because Quark though was just worthless.
Yeah, and that's the thing. They're still just asking for 5 bars of latinum, but obviously Quark's probably going to make way more than that for this land. But they got what they wanted at the start. They got 5 bars of gold pressed latinum.
As far as Quark sees it, that's a finder's fee.
Oh yeah, he I'm sure he'll be delighted with that as the fee.
He'll be happy to pay out that presumably small cut so he can extort the government.
I don't know. But I think it's mainly Quark, but the Ferengi in general, I'm starting to really love the word opportunity and the word lucrative. Like both those words are just really starting to like be ingrained into my brain.
Yeah.
Sounds like a lucrative opportunity. That's great. So yeah, I quite like this episode. I mean, the 2 plots were, miles apart from each other. They had nothing to do with each other, but I thought the main plot had some poignancy. I thought it had some good character stuff for Kira, some friendship stuff even for her and Cisco at one point, and then the subplot was just a bit of fun, really.
It was. Like I said, I think change it so the land is where they're going to move the guy to, and that's why they need to buy it, or just change it so they actually own just a small part on that moon, and they actually need to just buy this last bit before they can do it as well. Like just to give it a bit more tie-in. It would be really easy just to change a couple of lines here or there to make that work.
Yeah, I could see it. But honestly, it's 6.8 in IMDb, and I think that's actually a little underselling it.
If that's significantly lower than the average, I don't know what the average episode of Deep Space Nine is getting right now.
Season 1, it might be average or even slightly above average, but like I compared to like last episode, which I think was one of the worst of the season, was a 6.0. I feel like this is a bit of a bigger jump than that, but I mean, it's all a bit subjective, I suppose. But yeah, but still, no, I think this one has value. Like, if you were doing rewatches, but because there's so much of it, you're skipping episodes that you can skip. I would say you shouldn't skip this one. I think this has got some important character beats that are worth.
You shouldn't skip anything because that's something only a savage would do. But if you're going to,
I agree, but yeah. So that is progress. Obviously, next time we'll be going back to next gen because they're just alternating right now in the original release order. But next time we're at Deep Space Nine. We'll be doing an episode called If Wishes Were Horses, and I will read you the description on IMDb. While Dax investigates an unusual energy reading near Deep Space Nine to see if it's dangerous for the station, people's imaginations suddenly come alive, causing chaos. This has definitely been an episode of at least one of the shows before.
It was original series. It's the
bunny one.
The circus planet, essentially. Where all their things start coming true. It's like a theme park.
Yeah.
It was a terrible episode.
There's definitely been similar. I think there's a similar next gen episode as well. This is definitely one of those plots where a lot of shows do them. Like, I'm sure Buffy, or at least Angel, I think maybe did one of these. Like, this is just like any type of genre show that's got a bit of supernatural in it. They'll do one of these.
Yeah.
So, not expecting big things, but it could be fun.
It could be. See what they do with it.
Yeah, I wonder if maybe maybe Odo's not affected and he's like, why is everyone acting crazy here or something? Maybe they'll do something with that. I don't know.
No. He's affected. He just wishes for a bigger bucket. More luxurious bucket.
He just walks into a room and just sees waterfalls of just his people all just flowing in one big river.
Yeah, just grey goo everywhere.
The big orgy of the changelings. So there you go. Should I be saying that? Oh no, they did bring that outboard once. He found out that word.
Did. Yes, we're good.
I realize I'm not just using something that I've learned elsewhere. So there you go. That's what's coming up next time. So let us know what you thought of progress in the comments below. Like, subscribe, all that stuff. Apologies for the gap between the last episode and this one. It's all Connor's fault. I'll just leave it at that.
80%.
We'll be back next time with some Next Generation. So look forward to that. But support us all on patreon.com/MailFuzzTV. Help keep all the content coming. Go and check out MailFuzz Movies for a bunch of movie podcasts, including our sci-fi movie podcast, The Atomic Cinema Experiment, where myself and Tara do a lot of sci-fi movies, which might be of interest if you like Star Trek. So that is us. That is the show. Thank you once again for watching or listening. We always appreciate it. Keep watching Star Trek, and maybe, I mean, for all we know, maybe Odo had like family members on this moon that were just sitting around as a puddle, and all of a sudden, bleh.
Gone.